And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 169. Nice. Of the Designated Players Podcast. USMNT just took down Canada in a penalty kick shootout in the CONCACAF Gold Cup to move on to the semi-finals. So what better time than after we win the whole thing to talk about the USMNT. Today, we're diving into it all. We're going to talk about the Gold Cup so far. We're going to talk about CONCACAF as a region in general. We're going to talk Jesus Ferreira. We're going to talk about the slander that is being thrown his way. We're going to talk about Greg Berhalter a little bit. We didn't touch on that when it got broken, so we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about Landon Donovan's comments too. Are they taken out of context? Are people blowing up for no reason whatsoever? We'll talk about it. And then finally, we're going to end with a conversation about the most toxic place in the world, USMNT Twitter, and why it is the way it is. Stick around for those and more on this episode of the Designated Players Podcast. Connor, how are you doing?
I get to talk about my Lord and Savior Jesus Ferreira, so I am doing fantastic.
El Goat, that's right. My guy breaking records that nobody else has broken in this Gold Cup. So I would hope that he's among your top performers, but I kind of want to know who are your top performers and your worst performers so far for this men's national team. Just us, not for other teams.
I mean, Jesus has got to be in the conversation now.
Correct.
You can call him a pirate of the Caribbean all you want, or the pirate of the Caribbean all you want, which I think is an awesome nickname, by the way. Um, but I mean, somebody's got to score the goals. It's not like we were scoring them in 2018. Somebody's got to do it. So I'm happy that he is doing it. I'm happy that he's I want to say getting recognition, but I think there's plenty of people that are still not giving him his due credit. Uh, I think after last night, you got to say Matt Turner. The guy just is so clutch for us. Absolutely has solidified his spot at number one between the sticks for us. James Sands, another guy that I very much like James Sands. I think he is in my opinion, he's your go-to guy if Tyler Adams is down. I think he fills that role better than the other players we have available, in my opinion.
I like that. James Sands is also a part of mine. Very, very impressed. So, um, what I say is you can't really take a lot of good out of this. You can get performing at par or performing under par, and then you've got some who are actually overperforming. And to me, Sands is in that conversation. I really like DeJuan Jones. I think he's had a really good show at left back. Jesus for, of course, in that conversation. And for me, the big one, Jalen Neal. Jalen Neal has come in as a 19-year-old who doesn't have a lot of club time experience and has been very, very decent so far. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about him later on, but his ability on the ball, his line breaking passes, and the confidence at which he plays at such a young age is a really good bright spot. Yes, it's right now against some lesser competitions, but it's a bright spot. It's something to look forward to.
I want
What
to
about?
throw
Oh,
I
go
want to
ahead.
throw one more name out there as
Sure.
well. Brandon Vasquez.
Okay.
He pretty much come off the bench, I think, in every game. Hasn't gotten a ton of minutes, 3 goals in that time. He is absolutely taking advantage of the time he's getting.
Um, yeah, 100%. We got to backpedal.
Oh yeah, we
I,
forgot about something.
I got so excited to dive into Jesus Ferreira defense mode that we forgot to talk about Scar for the week. What do you got?
It happens. It happens. In honor of El Goat, the pride of Texas himself, I've got the Dallas scarf out. The Dallas emblem is on the other side. No, it's backwards. Whatever. Close enough.
I, of course, since we're talking about the United States and we'll be mentioning some things about Copa America, I got the U.S. Oh, Copa America Centenario, celebratory scarf. So super cool, super exciting. Um, let's jump back into it. Sorry, worst performers in the group so far.
Like team or player.
Players.
Ooh. That's a tough one. I'm not gonna say. I'm definitely not gonna say like Jordy Mahalo. I mean, this shouldn't be a tough one.
It shouldn't be.
Zendejas, uh,
Correct.
continuously disappointing. I don't. I don't understand why he starts every game at this point. I feel like we've seen enough. This feels like a Jackson Yule, Sebastian Lletget type situation where it's just a guy underperforming consistently that just continuously gets in the team. I feel like there was someone else too that I wanted to mention, and I'm blanking on who it is right now.
Your research on this professional podcast is second to none, friend. So let me take over.
Let me, yeah, I want to find the last. You're probably gonna say the last person.
I have a feeling I am. So I'm going to start off with one people probably aren't expecting me to say. John Tolkien was very poor in the Jamaica game. Really was not impressed. And again, young, playing against Premier League players. Like defensively, he was okay, but in the attacking phase, he didn't have any idea what he was doing. It was just up the line, up the line, up the line, up the line. Um, so I think he is in that group of people who probably is not benefiting from this tournament as much. Um, Aiden Morris, again, he got hurt. So I wouldn't say he's really the worst performer, but he didn't have a great showing against Jamaica either. And Alan Sonora. I mean, in the same breath as Zendejas, seen him multiple times. Underwhelming, underwhelming, underwhelming. Maybe it's time to move on. Again, it's a C team. I'm not super stressed that these guys are in it. But I think if we were to take anything out of it, those four, maybe three, maybe two, probably are not getting called back for anything more than a January camp anytime soon.
Well, you hope not, but you never know. I think Senor was the other one I was thinking of. I thought I almost feel like I remember. Didn't he get swapped out? Was he swapped out for Jackson Yule?
Yeah, he got hurt. Yeah, so him and he got hurt. Aiden Morris went for personal reasons, and when Senora came out, Yule came in.
Gotcha.
So I guess, and I was kind of touching on this, so I'll build into it. One of the last questions about the Gold Cup is, what do you take from these games? We're playing St. Kitts, we're playing Trinidad, we're playing a weak Canada side, a half good Jamaica side. We're not going to get a really, really tough competition, maybe until Mexico, maybe if we even get there. What do you take from this? So I think you can take stuff away, but not a lot of good. We know we can pick out who we don't think is at the level. We kind of just mentioned those guys already. We know the guys who are performing at the expectation that we would think so, and then we have those overperformers like we just talked about. So Sands and Neal, both player Sands, I expected to be good. I didn't expect him to run the show as a single pivot like he has been. Really, really impressed with his showing so far. Neal, I wasn't sure about. We knew his ceiling was high, but a lot of guys who come into the men's national team early will have that like start okay, plummet. I'm thinking Joe Scally, right? Plummet through the floor, gain confidence with their club team, then come back. Neal hasn't missed a beat. Again, not playing the best of the best, but he's looked good.
I think you could definitely take stuff from this, even though it's mainly like the C team, like you said. But that was kind of the same situation the last time we were in the Gold Cup. And what came out of that? We had two guys that were arguably going to be starting center backs going into the World Cup, the starting goalkeeper going into the World Cup. All that was found out from the Gold Cup. That's where Turner burst onto the scene. That's where Zimmerman and Robinson started to make a name for themselves in the national team. I think the same thing could be said here. I think DeJuan Jones has absolutely earned a right to be in the conversation for like the backup left back spot. Based that I think mainly based on his performances at the club level, but I think what he's done in the Gold Cup so far has been very well. As in addition, Jesus Ferreira has kept his name in the running for like the number. Not to, I know we'll go into it later, but like the number like 3-ish striker in the depth chart. I think other guys as well will start to get into the conversation based on their play in the Gold Cup, and other guys are probably going to fade off there you'll always have your regulars. You're never going to get rid of guys like Sean Johnson, Jordan Morris, DeAndre Yedlin. These guys will be here forever and be in the mix forever. But I think you'll get some guys that start to make their way towards maybe 18 backups.
So let me ask you something. What do you know? We know that this Gold Cup is not where we're sending our top players, and I've seen a lot on Twitter. Is it worth taking the Morris, the Yedlin, the Aaron Longs, the Sean Johnsons when you've got guys like Gaga Slinian, and when you've got this is a perfect showing for Joe Scally. Joe Scally could have gotten really good minutes here. Um, Cameron Carter Vickers, maybe. And I know the Euro guys are not really in the mix, but again, now you're looking at guys like Keaton Parks over Jackson Ewell. You're looking at getting Paul Areola back in the mix, right? After missing. I know he's been hurt. So he's not the best example. You know what I mean? Like guys that we already have seen, we know they exist. Great. Are there players, a lot of people talking Obed Vargas, a lot of people talking Caden Clark, the U20 guys, Daniel Edelman, guys that could have come in and shown, okay, this is what they did at the U20 level. Can they do it at the next level? Is this a good spot for them, for those type of guys?
I'm not saying that like the Morrises, Longs, and Johnsons are the best options to go with here, but I also don't think that you should just go with every single like 16 to 18-year-old that has any sort of hype and just throw them all into the Gold Cup team and cross your fingers and hope you win. Like you're going to need a mix of guys who can play in the system, guys who know how to play together, as well as mixing in a couple of young guys like a Jalen Neal. And I think that's probably the best recipe to get results while being able to see development from players. But I think if you just throw in Obed Vargas and Caden Clark and you just throw them all these really young guys in there together, I think you may run into a situation where it's just like too many new faces, too many new experiences for people, and then I think results could take a hit from that. And then it's like if you go out early, then was all this worth it? Like how much did you really gain from it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to. If you put out a team of all these young guys who have no experience and we bounce out before we get to the knockout stages, USMNT Twitter is screaming that we didn't even try. What's the point? Blah, 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 blah. But if we bring people who have the experience and have the mentorship ability to say, an Aaron Long to a Jalen Neal, like, hey, man, you didn't have a great showing at Canada. Let's walk through it. Let's talk about it, right? If you don't have those type of people, these performances, they hurt more than if you have somebody who can kind of stop that gap, right? And that's a big part of why we keep, even at the college level right now, why we're keeping a lot of these seniors around who don't play, and that was me included, right? Was we were getting a big team, we needed to trim down, but the people who didn't play still are a big part of the team. You need to have that sort of experience, that sort of leadership quality in there to guide them. Sean Johnson's a great example, I think, of a guy who fits that mold really well. So you need to have that balance. I think it's a great point. And again, you've got January camps. You're going to have tons of friendlies. You're going to have all these things that people are going to get their shots. People are going to play their way into based off of their club form. But I think it was a good mix at this Gold Cup for sure.
I agree.
So you got CONCACAF, right? So we are running through CONCACAF as a national team with our C team beating teams easily. The 7-0, 6-0. There are some teams that are competing with us, but they're tying our C team. Is the USMNT the top of the region right now?
No question. I think Mexico has gotten worse. I think Canada is definitely on the rise, but not quite there yet. I think the US is top of the region easily, especially if we had the right coaching in place. But talent wise, I think it's not a question.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. So we talked about it a little bit, right? Mexico falling off, Canada's unstable. They can't even pay players right now, let alone put out, the squad they want to put out. Those two are definitely top three with us, but then it falls off really, really heavily. You know, we're we have this B and C team that it used to make it tough, right? We used to have 4-0 games, 3-0 games. They weren't easy games, right? They were relatively challenging. And now these B and C teams are pretty much getting all these results all over the place. And again, you look at the makeup, right? B and C teams from 2 years ago, 4 years ago were mostly MLS starters or like fringe MLS guys. Excuse me. Edit that out. Um, but now they're lower tier European guys, MLS starters and stars. I mean, that's the C team that we're sending. You know, it's it's a much better look than Mexico aging or Canada still trying to figure it out. Panama, Costa Rica falling off because they're old. Nobody else really stepping up. So I ask, is this because USMNT is getting better, or is CONCACAF just getting worse?
I think this is a bit of an easy answer, or the easy answer, but I think it's a little bit of both. I
That is cop out.
I think we are definitely getting better. No question about it. Just look at the team from like 2018 compared to now. Like it's significantly better. It's significantly deeper. We have many more options. Just as you mentioned, the C team is playing right now and dominating teams. Granted that we should be dominating. Uh, but I also think CONCACAF is getting worse. I think Mexico, while still having some good players, has gotten worse. I think Canada has really good potential. They just kind of had to get that stability, like you said. But I feel like Panama, Costa Rica, I feel like they've taken a step back. And I don't know the teams well enough to say for certain, but I just feel like I haven't heard a lot in terms of like the next guys up for those countries, like who's coming into the mix. I think another team that could potentially be strong and build even more is Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
That team I feel like is very good on paper, but for some reason just underperforms very often. But that team could definitely be strong as well. I think they could be in there challenging with Canada, Mexico, and the US, and kind of making it like a top four. I guess similar to like when Costa Rica had prime Keylor Navas. But
You mean last year?
yeah. Uh,
um,
but yeah,
Jamaica.
I think overall CONCACAF has gotten worse.
Yeah, I mean Jamaica's got a good shot this upcoming Wednesday, right? They've got um, Mexico at 10 p.m. It's going to be a fight for the final, and they could get in there. But and here's the thing: the reason I think why you don't hear about these next guys up is a lot of those next guy up for those clubs used to be big MLS guys, right? You're thinking Alvaro Saborio, right? Was a massive guy in Concacaf and for his national team. But with MLS expanding and growing, you know, I saw this idea and I kind of dove into it, and I don't disagree with it, right? As MLS expands and starts getting these GAM, TAM, U22 designated players, all these different ways to sign better players, they're not looking at CONCACAF regions anymore to bring those players in. They're going to South America, they're going to Europe, they're going to places where these players are already, you know, part of the hype. Um, there was a kind of like a comparison of 10 years ago CONCACAF players getting regular MLS minutes and then now, and I mean it's fallen off a cliff. Like it's not even comparable because they're not looking there anymore. Those guys who used to be MLS, you know, mid-level senior guys or even MLS starters for some squads, they're being left behind. And that hurts the region as a whole because they're not going to Mexico. They're trying to, but Mexico's entire system is a nightmare right now. They're not going to Canada because Canada just started up. They're not coming to MLS, so they're kind of just stuck. Some of them are making that jump to lower level European leagues, but they're not getting time. So CONCACAF is definitely hurt and getting worse as we continue on. But much like MLS isn't responsible for our lower leagues, it's also not responsible for the region either, right? We can't be like, oh, we need to have 7 slots for CONCACAF eligible play. Like, we can't just do that because the league, you know, the thing is falling apart. So it's getting worse, but I don't know how we fix that. And I don't think it's in our power to fix it. I think we just need to continue to do what we do.
No, that's definitely a really valid point. Something I didn't even think about, honestly.
Yeah, I didn't either. I only saw it before, like right before, or right after the Canada game. I was like, you know what? That's a super good point. I hope I wish I could find who tweeted it because I want to give them credit. But if they're listening and you tweeted it, tell me, and I'll say thank you. Um. All right, we've talked Gold Cup, we've talked Concacaf. It's time to talk our Lord, Savior, and King, Jesus Ferreira. And now I can already hear the keyboards going from our Euro snob Twitter how can you say he only scores against Carabao? Blah, 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 blah. Quiet down. I'm going to start this off. The question has always been, is he in the top three right now? The only person I've heard who has never said anything wrong in his life is Alexi Lalas. And he went and said, Jesus Ferreira is number 2 on the depth chart. So if Alexi Lalas says it, we stand. So here's
It
the deal.
must be true then.
It has to be. It has to be. So here's the deal. Flo and Pepe 1-2. I don't think anybody disagrees. I don't think anybody can really put an argument out otherwise. The argument is Sargent, Ferreira, and everybody else. Josh Sargent has yet to do it consistently in a men's national team kit. He hasn't scored for the U.S. since 2019, but he also has the best chance outside of that top 3 to jump Jesus, because I do think Jesus is at number 3 right now. I think you're going to see him get called in more often, and it's really going to be Jesus versus Sargent in these friendly games. And they're going to say, you're going to have 30 minutes today. Go get something. They're going to give Flo and Pepe their time. And they're going to say, okay, Jesus, you got 30 minutes today. Figure it out. And the next day it'll be Josh, go ahead, figure it out. And whoever can figure it out gets a spot. Because if he locks down that Norwich role at number 9, he's got a really good shot at it, I think. Because that's, again, high level, playing consistently and succeeding. But my worry with Sargent is he's streaky. You look at Norwich. Everybody talks about how he scored 13 goals in the championship this year. 8 of those goals came in the first 13 games. Then he scored 5 in the next 27. So he's going to have to get hot at the right time. And I think Copa America is a big chance for him. I did do a comparison of goals versus like rated teams or whatever. Sargent's 5 goals, 1 came against Bolivia, 1 came against Peru, and 3 came against Cuba. Ferreira, 5 against Trinidad, 1 against Panama, 4 against Grenada, 1 against Mexico, 3 against St. Kitts. Sargent, I'm sorry, not Sargent, Pepe, 1 against Honduras, 2 against Jamaica, 2 against Grenada, 1 against El Salvador, 1 against Mexico. So you've got most of them padding against weaker teams, yes. Pepe's doing it at a higher level right now, yes. Sargent needs to get hot at the right time to take that spot. Otherwise, I think you have to go with the hot hand. And we spoke about this going into the 2022 World Cup. You need to take at least one person who's just bagging goals. Doesn't matter when. If they're bagging goals, you got to take them, right? The Herc Gomez argument. So I think Sargent's the closest, but right now my 3 are Flo, Pepe, and Jesus.
Yeah, my 3 are also Flo, Pepe, and Jesus, and I want Sargent to do well, and I think he has good potential, but I don't understand the Sargent hype. I just don't get it. He went to the Prem of Norwich and he was dreadful. He dropped down to the championship and was red hot to start the season, but like you said, was pretty cold to end it. And with the USMNT, he ghosts. Like in any meaningful game, I feel like he's just ghosting. I feel like I haven't seen this guy have a goal contribution in ages. I mean, I'm looking on FBref to see if his national team stats. I don't know if this is missing anything, but he has a bunch of friendlies that he's played in, and the only meaningful games that they have on here that he's played in is the World Cup and the World Cup qualifying, which he has like 270 minutes played and 0 goal contributions. at least Jesus Ferreira still scores in the games that he plays. Um,
Yes.
so I mean, for me, Ferreira does it on the club level. You know, he has struggled in games at the national team level, but I feel like he's shown more than Sargent has. So, I mean, for me, it's easily Ferreira over Sargent.
Mhm.
He's more consistent at the club level as well. I mean, he was super good last year, super great again this year. He gets minutes consistently. I think Sargent will get a lot of minutes as well. Um, and I honestly don't think that the championship is that much higher quality than MLS. So Ferreira doing much more in MLS says more to me than Sargent scoring 13 in 3,000 minutes in championship.
So here's the defense I will give to Sargent because he does deserve some of it. The games that he actually has played in for the national team have been tough. He's played against really good teams. So Bolivia, Ireland, France, Colombia, Peru, Italy, Jamaica, Mexico, Uruguay, Canada, Cuba are the two kind of weaker sides. Switzerland, Honduras, Mexico in the Nations League. And then he had a couple of World Cup qualifiers at against El Salvador and Honduras and Canada, and then Japan, and then straight in for the World Cup. So he really hasn't had that ability to, jump in and say, "Oh, I'm gonna stat pad against ABCD," right? And I'm not trying to like throw him out completely, right? But I'm looking at these games where, he had opportunities to play. The team itself is not like a bunch of terrible players, You're looking, he played with Weston McKennie, he played with Tyler Adams. That's back in 2018 when they were kind of doing the reset, right? But then you go to something like 2021 against Jamaica. Started with Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic, Yunus Musa, Kellen Acosta, Serginho Dest, Reggie Cannon, all playing in the same team. And he couldn't get one, right? Like, you can't, I don't think that there is blame to say, like, oh, he came in and he played against tough teams with bad teammates. I don't think that's a good argument because I've seen it come out like that was an argument. Um, don't think that's a real thing. But if there is one person I have to pick right now to say who jumps Jesus, it's Josh. And I think it's closer than people think, which is why there's that argument. But Jesus has been informing club, as you mentioned. He is scoring against the teams he's supposed to score against. Like, if he's coming out of these games with one goal against St. Kitts or one goal against Trinidad, people probably have an argument. But he's cutting them down. Now, there's the other argument that he's not getting the service against the better teams, which of course he isn't because better teams aren't allowing that service. That's why they're better. It's a catch 22. There's probably a different role for him. He does things that other people can't do, right? His ability on the ball in hold up play. And I'll be honest, I don't watch the championship. I don't sit down like most people think they do and watch every championship game and know about Josh Sargent's game. However, I do watch Jesus Ferreira game. I know that he can do it in a different role, and it's up to the coaching to get them out. We'll go to the coaches in a little bit. I want to ask what you think about this hate against him, like the people who are actively looking to make excuses against him.
I just don't really understand it. Like I am not a huge Josh Sargent fan because I think fans bail him out way easier than they do other players. But that doesn't mean that I want him to perform badly. Whereas I feel like people actively want Jesus Ferreira to perform poorly. I think it's better for the entire national team if as many strikers as we have are absolutely balling out. If Josh Sargent goes and tears up the championship with Norwich next season, that's fantastic for the national team. That just pushes Jesus Ferreira to work even harder. He can't get comfortable. And that's the same thing for Pepe and Ballo as well. So, I mean, if Sargent or Jesus Ferreira really start taking off and putting a lot of pressure on that first and second spot in the depth chart, that's only better for us. So it's so baffling that people will just actively want players essentially on their team to perform badly. It just doesn't make sense.
Yep. And that is exactly where I came from, right? So it is I can't believe this is a question. Like, how are we asking if this hate is out of pocket? I've never seen a fan base so quick to make excuses against one of its own players for doing well. Did he score against smaller teams? Yes. Does he play in Europe? No. Are you allowed to enjoy watching your national team score lots of goals against bad teams and win games by big margins? Yes. It is okay. It's such a weird concept that people are actively looking to find reasons for why certain players, which, let's be honest, it's usually MLS guys, shouldn't be included in things because of whatever league they play in. And this goes back to the Paul Arriola argument that we had a couple years ago. Come in, work hard, get good results, be happy. I think the big thing is everybody saw us being happy with Jesus Ferreira, and they're like, their instant reaction was like, oh, people think he's going to be our starting striker. No, I have not seen one person who's like, with seriousness, right? I will put my hand up. I tweeted it out to get engagements. Nobody with any seriousness came out and was like, "Oh yeah, this game definitely puts Jesus in the number one spot." If we are in a position to be arguing about the number three striker on our team, and we have to pick between a guy who's scoring 25 goals in MLS or 13 goals in the championship, we should be throwing a party. We should be throwing a parade, because I can remember back to a time where we couldn't find one number 9 to score one goal against one person. Why are we having a civil war over the fact that we have somebody scoring goals? Like, are we out of our mind? Like, stop playing the clout game. Just be happy your national team has a guy who scores goals. Half of CONCACAF would kill for Jesus Ferreira right now. Mexico would kill for Jesus Ferreira right now. What are we fighting about? What? Get Taylor Twellman in here. What are we doing? I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
Not to mention, both these guys are like 22 years old. Like they could significantly get better. Like there's so much time for them to continue to get better. They're performing well at a young age and have national team experience at a young age. And we're like, oh my God, this is terrible.
It is purely and utterly baffling to me. So here's the argument. The argument is always what league he plays in and what teams he scores against, right? Is it time for him to move on? Will his position in the national team be affected by the league he plays in come 2026?
I think if him being in MLS will always hold him back from getting the top spot in the national team. I don't know if he has the talent, honestly, to be in that number one spot in the national team. But I think if he stays in MLS, he will consistently be in that conversation for like third on the depth chart. But I think as long as he's in MLS, I don't think he beats out Balogun or Pepe as long as they're healthy and not like falling off a cliff in terms of form.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with this is if Jesus stays in MLS, collecting DP money and performing at the level that he's at, I do not think it hurts his chances of playing with the national team. I think people in positions of power in US soccer are smart enough to recognize that the league of MLS is comparable to other leagues that our strikers are playing in, bar Balogun, maybe bar Pepe. So I think Eredivisie is a little bit higher for some teams. However, what matters to that point is form, right? And this is something that I was thinking about during the whole argument, and I think this really has a little bit of merit. If you are a defender, the league you play in matters. If you are defending against guys who can't kick a ball or can't make runs or can't time runs or whatever, it hurts your ability to defend against people at higher competitions, right? If you are an attacker and you are in a form where you are cutting down any defender who tries to defend against you, and MLS is not nearly as bad as it used to be in defending, by the way. If you are in a league where your defenders are average to good, I'll put that level there. There are some who are not. I will not hide that, but average to good on a normal day. And you are in a form where you are scoring goals, not penalty goals, by the way, because we don't count penalty goals on this podcast. If you are cutting down defenders, making good runs, dribbling at them and winning their 1v1s, scoring goals, creating assists, that plays in more to what you do at the next level than being a defender, in my personal opinion. However, if a club comes knocking from Netherlands, from Belgium, from the championship, from South America, and they're willing to pay him good money, comparable or more, I wouldn't take a pay cut to leave. But if they're willing to pay him, I don't think you turn it down. Of course, we want our players challenge themselves at the highest level. But it doesn't mean that you make the move just to say I'm in Europe. We're well past that for the U.S. men's national. We're well past saying our guy is on the bench in the Lithuanian second division. And I'm using that specifically because that is a joke that's going around currently. We're past it. So you need to find a team that's going to play you, right? Pepe at Augsburg does not get in the men's national. Pepe at Grongenheim, or however you pronounce his team name, does. So you have to make the right move, and you need to know that you're going to play. So if you have a club that comes knocking, promises to pay you, promises to play you, and then goes in and gets you, I don't think you turn it down. But you don't go just to go, because your national team chances aren't hurting.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jesus Ferreira is easily talented enough to get a move too. He could easily be playing in Europe right now.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, right? Europe has to come in and beat Dallas's offer. Right? Dallas is paying him $1.5 million a year, something along those lines. Is that about right? Something close to that. I'm not leaving if somebody comes in and says, hey, come play in Europe for half that. What? What a dumb decision. Unless Greg goes up to him and says, pulls a Jurgen Klinsmann, I'm not taking you until you move to Europe, then you move. But if Greg is smart enough to say, hey, as long as you're bagging goals and your performances look good, like you're not just tapping in 4 goals against, Miami every week, then you're fine. And then everybody can relax. Speaking of our boy Greg, with 7 Gs now, if I calculated it correctly. He's back. He's back. Let's hear it. Let's hear thoughts. The news comes out. What do you think?
Boo. It's just lazy. It just feels so lazy. Like you couldn't look into it a little bit more to try to look at anybody else. I mean, 2 interim coaches have come in and have shown success with this team. Clearly, it's not like Greg was some mastermind creating success for this team. Pretty much, I think BJ and Hudson have proven that almost any coach can just step in at this point and have successful results with this team. They're just talented enough. So I don't understand why they couldn't look into something a bit more so that we can try and take that next step to compete with the Netherlands, the Germanys, the Spains. But now I just feel like we went right back to where we were before. And then we're just going right back to still being like a half a step behind those teams. And I can't remember. I don't know if this was a joke or if it was serious. And I can't remember if Adam was the one that said it, where they we're comparing numbers to what Greg had accomplished in the national team. It's like, well, of course Greg matches Greg's numbers the best because Greg is Greg.
Yeah. All right, let's just get this over with. Greg coming back is the last thing anybody wanted to see.
Anybody, MLS
Anybody.
or Eurosnob.
Correct. Nobody is sitting here like, yeah. And I'm going to go back to a comment you made 3 years ago, I think. He's got good MLS experience and is coaching players who are out of his level in terms of coaching. I have a C license in coaching. I cannot go into the national team and make them better because they know more than me. That barrier is a real thing. I can't go to a college Division I level and coach them to be better because they know more than me right now. That barrier, I do exist. I do believe exists, and I think it's a real big part of what needed to be a part of it. Now, I will put Greg on the defensive, or I will be on the Greg defensive here. Excuse me. By far the most winningest head coach in our history. 71.67% win percentage over Bruce's 66.55. Asserted dominance over El Tree for the first time ever. Did the Gold Cup Nations League double, Gold Cup with a much more rotated squad than usual. Qualified and got out of the World Cup group in 22, which we didn't even qualify for in 2018. Used the youth players and got them to the level that they needed to be at the national team. And lastly, and most importantly, nearly every single person in that locker room loves him. Every person comes out and talks about how that locker room atmosphere is the best they've ever been in. They all fight for each other, and you can look at it in the Canada game, right? I had a buddy texting me who doesn't watch soccer in the slightest. He'll turn on the men's national team games every once in a while. And he goes, I can't believe we're going to lose to Canada. You know, this is 12 minutes left in extra time. I go, bro, this isn't over yet. Just wait. He goes, no, man, this game's over. Come back and win the game. That's not a BJ Callahan going, rah, rah, here we go, guys. That stems from what Greg did. Do I think he's the right guy? No. Probably not. I don't really know, but I don't feel like it doesn't fill me. But here's the other thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about. Who are the realistic options to take that spot that really wanted to for the money that they were going to pay? Because I know they say like, oh, money's no option. Money was an option. We're the American Soccer Federation. Money's always an option. Apparently, Marsh didn't want it. I didn't hear anybody from Europe or South America come out and say I wanted it. The only person who said was like, oh, I'm interested was Patrick Vieira. Do we really want Patrick Vieira, who doesn't have to my knowledge, doesn't have national team coaching experience, which is a massive change from club team? Two completely different layouts there. Are we going to dip back into the MLS pool again? Are we going to go Shrundalo? Are we going to piss everybody off because we didn't go hire, Jose Mourinho's 3-year-old son? Like, I don't know who the realistic options were. Now, was the process sketchy? As you mentioned, yeah, it was. There's something that I didn't love about. But I'd love to know who was in the running and who actually, like, if they offered, would have taken it. So I feel like a lot of them, like, were free agents and were definitely available. But the second US approached them, they were like, nah, I'm good.
I feel like you could find somebody else. Like, I just don't think going back to Greg is solving any of our problems. I mean, we saw what we were capable of with him. Clearly, there's still a level above that. Maybe it's an MLS coach that gets in there. I'm not sure. I have my doubts. But I feel like they could find somebody else. Try somebody else. I would have taken Patrick Vieira over going again with Greg.
See,
it would have at least been a coach that has experience with a European style of play where all our players are basically playing right now.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I think that's a fair point. And you've changed me a little bit there. Like I said, once I see the list, I think I'm a little bit more about it. but without the list, I don't know who I can compare it to and be like, oh man, if we come out and it's Joachim Low, Jose Mourinho, Carlo Ancelotti, and they all said no, we're gonna pass on them to go to Greg. Get them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
USMNT Twitter, go. Unleash the hounds, go get them. But if it's Patrick Vieira, a half committed Jesse Marsh, Chris Armas, and my brother, I'm taking Greg. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing: he didn't do anything in the game on paper that should tell us no. Like he's gotten the guys to play for him. They understand his relatively crazy system for now. I almost feel like it's one of those things where like, if we have everybody healthy, just put them on the field and tell them to go play. You know, like I feel like it just don't mess it up. That's probably maybe that's the message to him. Hey, Greg, we're gonna give it back to you. Don't mess it up. Just let them do their thing. You don't even need to say anything. Just go pick the starting 11. Actually, no, don't even pick the starting 11. Just go to Twitter. Let Twitter tell you who to pick, and then just go play.
Just
right?
throw
Like,
bounce passes.
Yeah, literally. You keep the ball going as quickly as you can. So here's the last question for our boy Greg. Is this signing indicative that he's got the reins for the 26 World Cup?
I hope not. I really hope not. That whoever's in charge for 2026 really needs to be the right man in charge. And I just don't think that it's Greg. I know you mentioned that like he's statistically the most successful and he gets the guys to play for him, but I think a lot of that is without any context. I think Greg has easily had the most talented US pool in history. I think bar none. I think he has a weaker CONCACAF than what other coaches have gone up against. And I would say I agree that it's great that the guys, a lot of the guys love to play for him. I'm sure there's not everybody loves to play for him. I mean, I'm sure Pepe doesn't like to play for him. I feel like I've heard things about Scally not loving Greg. But the main guys seem to love him. So that's something, I guess. There does seem to be good camaraderie with the team, which I think, credit to Greg if he built that. But I think that's an excellent opportunity to go to someone else and capitalize on that camaraderie and team chemistry. The more I look at it, the more I actually like Patrick Vieira as the manager, because like I mentioned before, he's got the European experience. He managed at Crystal Palace, he managed at Nice. But he also has the MLS experience too. If he has MLS guys in there, he managed at NYCFC and he was fantastic there. So I think he would have been a great choice. I think I almost feel like going with Greg without the intention of him being in charge for 2026 just seems stupid. Because what are you going to do? Just bring him in to do a couple of tournaments before then and then rotate and have guys adjust to a whole new system before then, versus you could have someone now and like get 4 years under this new system, get guys familiar playing with each other, go play Copa America with the new coach. But instead we're risking it now, playing Copa America with Greg, and then Greg gets sacked and now we have to start all over again with a new system.
Yeah. So this is my sticking point with this hire. If he goes into Copa America and just lays an egg, poops the bed, pees his pants, I mean, however you want to put it, he's got to go. We cannot go into a World Cup on our home soil with 0 games in qualifying and only a bunch of friendlies as a side that's out of form. You can bring BJ back. You can bring Chris Armas in. Hell, call me. But if he fails at Copa America, he's got to go. And it doesn't matter. I mean, pay Jesse Marsh an entire city if you need to. Call Kansas City, Marsh City next year. I don't care. But you cannot let him lay in it. Like, that needs to be a stipulation in the contract where if you don't get to the semifinal, I mean, I'm making this up, right? If you don't get to the semifinals of Copa America, you're gone. And that's just that. Like you have to have some sort of metric for him. You can't just be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna roll the dice and see what happens. This is the biggest moment in soccer history outside of '94 for United States. We need to hit it out of the park.
I'm worried that he's gonna hit like a gray area in terms of Copa America performance, and they're not gonna pull the trigger on it. He's gonna make it to like the quarterfinals or something where it's like, like could he have done better? I don't know. Let's just hang on to him for now. And then we're gonna be stuck with him.
Yeah, yeah. It's that's my worry. That's my biggest worry about him is less about what he does with his team and more that will give him too much of a leash.
Yeah, I mean it's very frustrating watching his tactics and watching a team that just the team just doesn't score goals when he's in charge. And
And
I mean,
that's yeah.
and Anthony Hudson came in and BJ Callahan came in, and it felt like the goals just started flowing again. And I don't know if it was just like maybe they, to your point, just were like hands off and were like, all right, you're way more talented than your opponent. Like just go play, be talented and score goals. But for whatever reason, when Greg was in charge, we just could not score goals. We were allergic to goals. We were just awful at scoring. And I'm very worried about going right back to that.
No, 100%. Um, Speaking of long leash, Landon Donovan still speaks on TV. Landon Donovan's comments. Let's read a quick quote here. Um, I think people are taking it. Maybe I'm reading it with more of a how do I put this? Maybe with more of an optimistic view on Landon. But here's the quote: "The World Cup is coming in 3 years. This is once in a lifetime. He's going to be in the prime of his career, his life as a soccer player, his earning potential. I'm sure he's making plenty of money, but the ability to come to MLS, kind of like Messi did, I'm not sure that's. I'm not so sure that wasn't a big reason for Messi, the World Cup coming here. I think it would have been a great move for the Galaxy to go out and get Christian, bring him here, pay whatever you have to pay him, bring an American superstar who has global recognition back to MLS ahead of the World Cup. I think it would have been a great move, and I can hear Twitterverse going crazy already, as they did. My biggest thing is he needs to play. I know we all said when he went to Chelsea, he's going to play a lot. He didn't play a lot, especially last year at Milan. I would think he's going to play, but you just don't know. So leading into the World Cup, if he spends the last 6 months leading into 2026 like he did this year, then what happens? He's not playing and he's not going into form into the World Cup. So when I read this now, and it's after rereading it, I kind of understand where people are coming from. That last paragraph is what got me. My initial reaction to this was Landon Donovan says if Christian Pulisic goes to Milan and gets a Chelsea treatment, he goes to Italy, gets a Chelsea treatment, doesn't play, and he's got a year, he's got 6 months before the World Cup. He should come to MLS. LA Galaxy should go get him right before the World Cup and give him consistent playing time against a higher level than sitting on the bench and go. Now, that first paragraph where it says he's got plenty of time to make money and plenty of time to earn praise, that makes me think he did mean he should have come here right now. I'm curious as to what you think.
I get wanting him to have playing time going in. Obviously, you want him to be fresh. He's a super important part to our team. But you could find a better move for him than him coming to MLS. This isn't like 2018 and it's like I'm just gonna make something up. I know he wasn't in Europe, but like 2018, Josie Altidore is in Europe and not playing for Sunderland or something or AZ, and it's like, all right, we want Josie to get sharp before the World Cup. Let's give him a loan to Toronto, play there for 6 months, get some game time. Pulisic is at one of the best teams in the world. If he needs to take a step down to get game time, he can easily go to a more mid-table Italian, English, French German team get game time and still play at a higher level of competition than MLS. Don't get me wrong, it would be fantastic for MLS. And obviously, you and I are both big fans of MLS and want to see it grow. But for the sake of the national team, he needs to be getting minutes against better competition than he would be getting in MLS.
Yeah. It's like I said, this is tough because I had this whole thing, prepped out saying we're over analyzing this or we're under analyzing this, and I think the words are taken out of context, but reading it quote for quote, it's tougher. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to continue on this. Everybody and their brother, when making excuse number 947,362 of why they won't watch MLS, is saying MLS won't be seriously until they get star in their prime players to the league instead of selling off young talent. And then the second somebody suggests MLS should go sign a young in their prime talent, they blow up and act like the earth is ending. And how dare you ever say that one of our players should come here? How are you going to say one thing then instant blow up when somebody suggests they actually do it? You know, that is the other part about me is like, oh wow, somebody says MLS should actually go and do what people have been saying for the last 10 years. No. Can't happen. No. If we're gonna do it, it has to be other people's star prime in their prime talents, not ours. No. Like it's just again, it's leading into a very good conversation at the end of this, but it just doesn't make sense. Yeah, and people are like, "Oh, Christian Pulisic is going to come here and be terrible." Nobody's going to let this guy just walk around the field and make Pirlo money by being Pirlo. They're going to make him work for every minute of the game. He's going to go and work as hard as he can.
Yeah, he's not gonna he's not going into retirement if he came here. Like he's preparing for the World Cup. You think this guy's just gonna slack off on preparing for the World Cup? Like I haven't seen any inclination that Pooley is the type of guy to just completely slack off.
No, he was pissed when he wasn't playing. He was pissed when he was playing in the wrong position. He was pissed when he wasn't playing well. Dude's a competitor, 100%. Now, people are now taking shots at Don, saying that he only wants people to do this so he can protect his legacy, or he doing this makes him overrated. What are your thoughts on that? And I know you weren't around for a lot of the Donovan time, so just your thoughts on him as a person,
Obviously, people are just blowing that way out of proportion. I think his intentions are definitely in good spirits. I think he wants Pooley to just get game time. He'd be guaranteed game time if he came to MLS. There's no question about it. He'd be playing week in, week out, especially for a Galaxy team that has no wingers. And I think that would obviously be helpful for him ahead of a World Cup. I just think he can do better than MLS in terms of getting better competition because we want to take that next step and compete against the Spains and the Germanys and the Englands. So if that's going to be the case, then he should be playing against those players as much as he can. And those players, as much as I wish it were the case, will not be in MLS by 2026. But I think people are, so I think people are blowing it out of proportion. Of course, they just take the easy. What's the saying? It's like grabbing. No, it's like something about the branch, like something about fruit in the branch.
Low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit. Yeah. People are just taking low-hanging fruit to dunk on somebody that played in MLS and dunk on somebody that didn't play for Chelsea and Borussia Dortmund.
I guess here's the thing, right? If we are here as a league that is fighting all these people saying we're never going to be taken seriously unless, how do you convince people to be that person to break the mold, right?
I think you could do it. I just think right before a World Cup is a little bit tough.
Okay.
To convince someone to break that mold. I think it might be easier if it's maybe in one of the off years. Maybe it's a year right after the World Cup or something.
And I think that's sorry, I was hoping you'd go there. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think
Okay,
that's the right answer. I think the right answer isn't before the World Cup. Because here's the thing. Before the World Cup, majority of the people know who you are. And I think we've talked about this a little bit. Majority of people know the big guys. After the World Cup, that's when you go get them. People watch the World Cup in their home state, in their big stadium, and they say, wow, that guy was really good. Then they find out that team just signed him. Great, I'm getting, 5 games a year to go watch this guy play. That is, I believe, the right answer.
Yeah, it's like imagine. Obviously, this is very far away from happening, but it's like imagine MLS went and signed Neymar after the 2014 World Cup. Like that would be massive. Neymar was like on top of the world after the 2014 World Cup.
Now we might get him 10 years later, as he's rumored to New York City.
Retirement league. Here we go again.
Yeah, here we go. Right. Listen, I don't think the shots are valid at Donovan. People are trying to call him overrated for suggesting that a player come play in the local league.
That's just stupid.
Landon Donovan is easily a top 3, if not the single best U.S. men's national team player of all time. And he spent the majority of the time in MLS, yes. People, I have seen them tweeting, he could have been great if he challenged himself in Europe. My guy, Landon Donovan is the reason, first off, MLS survived for a lot of it, by the way. He was the reason the USMNT were as successful as they did. The 2014, the goal, Donovan. League doesn't determine ability. He is a great example of that. You can be an MLS DP, make the same money or more than what you would in Europe, ensure you actually get paid, hello, Reggie Cannon, still be in good form like Landon did, and ball out, as we go back to the comment I made before. For an attacker, if you are in form, it is way less important what league you play. And I don't mean that by saying, hey, go play in my local Sunday league and you're going to go to the, you know what I mean? If you're playing in a top league in a top 20 league, go to Greece, go to South America, stay in MLS, go to Japan. If you are playing and playing well in a top league, that is more important than what league it is. Because regardless of where that is, being in good form as an attacker is more important than being in okay form in a good. It's just different. And I don't really know how to explain it. It's just when you are doing something like that over and over and over again, continually finding success, you just continue to find success. It's just, that's how it works. It's a very important part of the game. And regardless of what you think about Donovan's comments, by the way, trying to belittle his achievements for club and country because of what he said is the most I don't know ball thing I've ever seen in my life. It's silly.
Yeah, 100%.
And you know where all of those comments are coming from?
Nice. I was hoping you would segue like that.
They're coming from our friends on USMNT Twitter. Connor, I want you to ask the first question.
Okay. Is USMNT Twitter the most toxic group out there?
So here's what I have to say on that. I work in a lab with very dangerous chemicals. Things that will burn you, things that will melt your skin, things that will cause you to go blind, things that can kill you. I could take every single one of those chemicals, pour them into a bucket, walk it over to an active uranium-235 landmine field, pour my caustic chemicals over the U-235, and still be less infected than being in a toxic USMNT Twitter conversation. That is how bad USMNT Twitter is. Thank you for allowing me to put science on the podcast.
You're such a nerd, bro. You're such a nerd.
And I'm not calling out all USMNT fans. Of course, there are people who have really good logic, right? I went through some of the comments and I saw people who literally tweeted, I don't care if we win or lose this shootout. I just want Ferreira to miss so we can laugh at him again. I saw people tweet, Miles Robinson will be nowhere near our A team. with performances like that after committing a single handball offense in the box. There is an entire section of our fan base, we spoke about this earlier, that would rather see our national team lose games than see certain players succeed. And not just MLS, by the way. There are players that they will pick who are just like, I don't like him. I hope we lose so that I can talk about how bad this guy is. People have watched the same game and said Jalen Neal is an absolute lock for 2026 after impressing in a game versus St. Kitts and Nevis. And in the same breath, said Jesus Ferreira scoring a hat trick doesn't count. And then when Jalen Neal swings and misses at a clearance in Canada, which nearly gives them a goal, he's young. He's still learning. Jesus Ferreira, 2 years older than him, gets played out of position for 45 minutes as a right center mid. And you're sitting there saying, this guy's not coming anywhere close to our A team. He can't even score a goal against Canada. It's just toxic, like, I need to be right by hating on people that makes the conversation about soccer so unfun. Like the reason I take breaks from Twitter after soccer, after USMNT soccer. It's not everybody, but the people who claim to be these super USMNT fans who actively want to see certain people fail just so that they can have a point to talk about, I don't get it. And here's the thing. We used to talk about it all the time. Like, oh, I can't wait for Sargent to go in and fail so the Euro snobs understand. But here's the deal. If Sargent scores a hat trick, I'm throwing my hat in the air and I'm celebrating. Like, I'm not sitting here like, I can't believe he just scored a hat trick to win us a game. You know? Like, there are different ways to, like, not like a player. The people who go out and will look for any excuse for their favorite players to be okay, but their least favorite players to be, what's the word? Crucified, I guess, lack of a better term. It's just so toxic and outrageous. There are always excuses for the European based players, calls for the heads of the MLS ones, or even just players that you like versus players that you don't. And people always say, like, oh, it's not MLS. It's just that there are better MLS players we want to see. And then they bring in those other MLS players, and it's the same commentary. If Pepe stays at FC Dallas, we're hearing the same thing about Ferreira that we hear about, or we're hearing the same thing about here, we hear about Ferreira. If Jalen Neal doesn't move, I guarantee you within 2 years, he's getting slandered like Miles or Walker Zimmerman. I will put money on it because anybody who plays in MLS apparently just can't play soccer. And it's wrong. It's unbelievably toxic. It's outrageous. It's stupid.
You know who's the perfect example for that? Jordy Mihailovic.
Yes.
He has been like taunted and like beloved by all of USMNT Twitter for his Gold Cup performances, which have been really great. And I love to see it. But when he was tearing it up with Montreal and MLS, not a single word was said about him with the national team. Not a peep. Nobody was calling for him to be in the national team. They probably didn't even know he existed. Now all of a sudden he's in Europe, and now he's a god, and we should get him involved with the A team. And meanwhile, in the same tweet, I bookmarked the tweet. I bookmark a bunch of
I love it.
Eurosnob tweets. In the tweet, complimenting Jordy Mihailovic for a great assist, which it was a fantastic assist. It is slandering Jesus Ferreira for scoring against only minnows. So apparently only European-based players can do good things against bad teams, and MLS players have to basically just not exist in those games. I mean, even if he scored 15 goals, it would probably not still be enough. You know, he's only scoring against garbage teams, dentists, butchers, you know. But when Jesus Ferreira, when Jordy Mihailovic does it, who's immediately in Europe now, all of a sudden he's fantastic and we should get him in the national team.
And my favorite part about that, right, is everybody's talking about how, he's playing at a higher level in Europe. He has 500 minutes in Europe, has scored 1 goal, 1 assist, and is balling out against St. Kitts and Nevis. And you guys are just flipping out for this guy. And here's the thing. I love the fact that he is playing at a good level right now. in the national team. I have no idea what he's doing in Europe because, again, I don't sit down and watch the Eredivisie on a Saturday morning. Maybe I will. I don't know. Probably not. But here's the deal. If you're going to go out and say, yeah, you can't take anything from these games, don't slander Jesus. Don't praise Jordy. Don't praise James Sand. Don't praise Jalen Neal. Don't slander don't slander Zendejas if you're going to say that these games don't matter. If you're going to go out and say the only thing you can do is show bad performances, that's fair. Zendejas was poor. Senora was poor. Tolkien was poor. These guys playing against lower teams who should have been really, really good were not. Plain and simple. And that is okay. You are allowed to have that opinion. I 100% agree. But you can't go out and say certain players' performances don't matter, but other players do, and use the team that they play against as the same argument. It's silly. The toxicity. And here's the thing. And then it's the argument that comes on about it. And it's just like the points that get made are so dumb. It's like Miles Robinson will never be in our A team again. Hey, Miles Robinson's our best 1v1 defender. Miles Robinson plays in MLS, so that's physically impossible. What? Like, where are we like, you can't even pull a stat. You can't pull a number. You can't do anything. You're just going to say he plays in a league. And again, this is a very bottled, conversation because I don't have all these tweets saved. But I bet you if I went on to Twitter right now, I bet you I could probably just pull up. Let's search Jesus Ferreira. Latest. High pressure game, decent opponent equals Jesus Ferreira disappeared. That's from USMNT Snob. USMNT Snob also has 0 tweets about, nothing about Jalen Neal missing that ball. Nothing about, nothing about anything except for Jesus Ferreira. Now, granted, his 5 followers are probably loving. Let's see. What else do we have? Shocker. Jesus Ferreira doesn't do a damn thing against a good opponent. I'm shocked. Sarcasm. Oh, look. Nothing about anybody else. It's almost like, and I know this is going to sound crazy, it's almost like these people don't actually know what they're talking about, but they see something on Twitter that somebody got a lot of likes for, and they're repeating it in hopes that they get more likes. I know, crazy, but that's what it seems like to me.
I mean, Sargent's USMNT numbers are literally basically identical to Ferreira's. I mean, just look at who he scored against for the national team. It's like Bolivia, Cuba. His best is he's got a goal against Peru. And then I think he had like an assist against Jamaica. I'm trying to find if I missed anything.
No, that's about what I got. Here's the deal. I think we've gone on a good little bit. USMNT Twitter is toxic. Anybody who disagrees, spend one night after a USMNT game. Don't even tweet at them. Just follow a couple of USMNT accounts and then read the comments on any tweet they put out. And it's a bunch of people who don't know the game and feel like they need to lose their mind over a C team not being perfect with a interim to the interim head coach, and they expect every game to be perfect and have 150-0 scoreline, instead of saying, hey, this is a pretty good opportunity for some of our players to show that they can do it against lesser teams. Because guess what? If you can't do it against these lesser teams, there's not a shot that you can do it against the next step up. But if you can do it against these lesser teams, guess what? Now you get yourself a chance. Nobody is out here saying, most sane people are not out here saying being successful in a Gold Cup against St. Kitts and Trinidad gets you into the A team. However, what most people are or should be saying is having a good performance here means maybe you get called in and get some sub minutes with the A team or with our B team going to certain friendlies or tournaments. But the idiocracy behind, oh man, I can't wait to yell at somebody for being excited that one of our players has scored 3 goals in back-to-back games because I think that they think that he's going to be a number one striker. And I don't like that because he's in MLS and that simply cannot be a thing. It's like it's not worth the trouble. Like I would much rather never have a conversation about the US men's national team ever again than have to sit through USMNT Twitter like consistent. People who do that, I feel so bad.
Yep. Yep.
Connor, what else do we need to talk about? I feel like we've got more.
I don't know. I mean, we could probably talk all day about toxic USMNT Twitter. We'll probably have an entire episode on it.
Yeah, well, like I said, and I feel like I know people probably haven't made it this far, but I feel like we should clarify when we talk about Euro snobs, is not the people who are supporters of, or at least watchers of MLS, USMNT, and other leagues, and saying, "Hey, this is this can be done better." It's the people who haven't seen a game in 10 years and still think that it's kick, run, chase, and figure it out. Those are the Euro snobs because they don't actually understand what they're because their information is dated. Let me put it that way. Now, if you want to go and lose your mind on that, go right ahead. I couldn't care less. However, let's just end it there. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, commenting, whatever you guys are doing. We appreciate you. We hope you enjoyed it. This is going to go live. We're going to put it out however long it is. We'll put it out that much before the USMNT game because USMNT kicks off at 7:30 on Wednesday. We'll put this out on Wednesday. And you guys can listen to it beforehand and then take these notes and go on into the game and see if you see what we're seeing. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you know when we next go live, which will be probably another top 10 on Monday, top 10 Mondays, followed by some MLS history next Wednesday and fun game Fridays. So make sure you're sticking around for all that. Follow us wherever you are on social media so you know when we post clips, we can interact with you. We can protect you from USMNT Twitter. It's called the block button and or the mute button. Give it a try. It's great. Yeah, no, hope you guys enjoyed it. And we will see you all next time on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.